Hi all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Hello, we can hear you.
Nice to see you. We will wait until Karin will join. They will take some minutes, but she should be there soon. In case someone wants to help with the minutes, I've just posted the link to the minute site.
All right, everyone, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Excellent. I am so sorry. I am in a different time zone and I completely forgot. So, Beatrice already put the notes page in.
Yes.
And let's see who else here. We've got, excellent, everybody's here. All right, let me pull up the agenda and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm, boy, I need reminders of things or something. This is, all right, so to get started, I don't have a Notewell slide for you all, but I recognize all of the names on the call. This is an official IETF meeting, so we will be abiding by the rules of the IETF. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Dieter or myself. So with that, moving on to a quick update of our documents that are basically on Dieter's and my plate. So the NTP update registries, we have resolved the issues that came up during the IESG review of it, and now it's back on Eric's plate to move it forward. The enterprise profile has also gone through IETF working group last call and has the and is in the negotiations with the ADs after that. So we have a couple more to resolve. I don't believe Doug is here. I think he's on vacation this week. Yeah, I don't see Doug. So that's the enterprise profile. The third one is NTP over PTP. That one we need to do a Shepherd write-up on, but we have gotten working group consensus on that one to move it forward, and it has been coordinated with 1588. And the final one, the NTP interleave modes, has also been updated and is moving forward. Is Miroslav on this call? There, yes, Miroslav's on the call. Okay. No, there's no slides being shared. I'm just talking through it. So to switch points 2 and 3. Oh, okay. Well, when Rich joins us, we'll go back to that. So so there are no slides being shown because, like I said, I completely forgot this meeting was today. I'm actually on vacation in Prince Edward Island, Canada, visiting family. So I guess I turned off my notifications or something. So, but it's a lovely day here, I'll have to say. It's too bad. But anyway, so that's where we are with those 4 items. When Rich comes on the call, we can discuss it more with him if he wants to discuss the registries document more. I believe the last status on that was we needed to get with Eric. I believe all of the ballots on it have been cleared. So we'll see what he says when he comes along. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and Doug's not here. Are there any questions on the 4 documents that I've just mentioned that are past the working group stage and onto the publication stage? No, excellent. So then the next agenda item is the update from the IEEE 15.8 activities. There's just a couple things I wanted to mention. I see some of you are familiar or from the 1588 community, so you will be familiar with these activities. The first one I wanted to mention is there is an IEEE 1588.1 PAR that has been approved, and that's for something called client server PTP. It is something that looks a little bit more like NTP but uses PTP. There are a number of proposals on the table yet, so there's no clear indication of what the final product will look like, but work has started on that. If anybody's interested in that, if you go to the 1588 standards site, you can request to be part of that working group. There are a number of different options of how that could go forward. It's also possible that some of the NTP over PTP work might be reusable in that context. So we'll have to see what comes of that. It's also possible that the NTS will be used in some way in that. But like I said, it's very early days. There's only been a couple meetings held so far. I don't know if any of the other participants from 1588 want to comment on that activity at all. Nope. Okay. So the other part of the 1588 work that I wanted to point out was the we had a joint meeting a couple months ago between the security communities of 1588 and NTP. It was not an official meeting for either group. We will be trying to schedule another one at the end of September, early October. PTP, the 1588 community is looking at some of the vulnerabilities that were identified by the NTP community and by some PTP developers on the PTP side of the house for NTS. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in it. I know several of you did participate in the call that we had a little while back. And the 1588 Security Subcommittee is meeting again roughly monthly to try and address some of the issues that have been identified. So we're attempting to have a lot more coordination between the two groups going forward so that we can reuse some of the materials between each group. So is there any question on 1588 activities? If you're interested in any of these activities, feel free to reach out to me and I can provide you some pointers. That would be fine. I see that Rich has joined us, and apparently, Rich, I haven't seen my email yet. Apparently, you've sent an email asking to switch items 2 and 3, and we've already hit 2. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything more about the registries draft. I know that it's
No, I was
you go ahead.
I was mainly curious where it was and if there's anything I need to do. That's all.
I'm not aware of anything you need to do right now. It's back in Eric's court. And so it looks like all of the discuss has been cleared, so it's ready to progress. We just need to ask Eric to what the next steps are. But I'm not aware of anything that we need to do or that you need to do. I think it's ready to go.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Any other any other discussion on the NTP TikTok status items 2 or item 3 on the agenda? No. Excellent. So that brings me to the third item. We have the requirements draft. We have this document has stalled out a bit. So the reason I wanted to put it on the agenda today, even though we don't have an update on it, was I think we need to, it's not entirely clear whether we're going to end up publishing it or not, but I still think we need to get some more, we need to move it forward and we need to get some of the comments addressed. And I think it would be helpful if we added another editor to that document. So I don't know if anybody is, as you'll notice it's expired at this stage. I think the one that we did for security prior to doing the NTS work was very helpful, and so I would like to go ahead and try and get this one wrapped up. If anybody is interested in helping edit that document, that would be great. Reach out to Dieter or I. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering what are exactly the open points still on that document, because I've lost track of that a bit.
There were some comments from some of the people who felt their comments were not properly addressed. But I don't remember exactly what those were. And suffice it to say, I did not look into it before this meeting. And I don't see either of the people that, there was a couple people who, I think the main points are pretty much all addressed. But I think there was a feeling that that we weren't doing a good job of properly addressing the comments, which kind of brings me to a side note, which we'll get to a little bit later. But as many of you are aware, the IETF is moving more and more towards GitHub. And so we are in the process of trying to set up, we have an NTP org now, and we're in the process of moving our working documents over to that. And there's a number of reasons to do that. We started setting it up after the Vancouver IETF in July, and we're moving stuff over there. So that's one of the things I want somebody to help with, is moving that requirements document over. I'm working with James to get the rest of the comments addressed so that we're clear that we can move forward with it. So, oh, James is in the queue. Excellent. I didn't even see you on the call, James. Go ahead.
Last time I checked, I think all of the critical comments were answered. There was obviously some people who were opposed to the progression of the document, leaving the working group. But I think in any case, before we start adding more editors, I think we need to be clear about what exactly the work needs doing. As for the GitHub moving, I'm more than happy to do that. I've done that already with my previous working group. Just catch up with me on email or something after, and we can
Okay.
sort that out. That's fairly straightforward.
Okay. Yeah, I was not recalling that there were any big issues left. I think it was just, some people like to have better, some people like to have, anyway, there was a couple people that complained to us about not getting their comments addressed, but I felt like the comments were minor types of details and language, and not the key points of what the document needs to be. Dieter and I had discussed with Eric about publishing it, and he basically said, there's some people that feel that they're useful, there's other people that feel that they aren't, and if we feel that's useful, we can go ahead and pursue having it published. So my thought is to go ahead and get it published, if we can get that done. And Dieter has been sort of spearheading everybody moving over to GitHub. So he'll, if you don't mind, Dieter, if you'll reach out to James and do that. So
I can do that, yes.
make us a little bit more compliant with the IETF, the current way of IETF processing. Also, there's a hope that at some point the RFC editor will be able to just make use of the GitHub repos for their processing. So it will be a smoother transition from the working group through the IESG to the RFC editor for that. So okay then, James, let's go ahead and move it over and do one more round of comments, and we may not need another editor if we can get that wrapped up. All right. All right, so the next document is the NTP v5 specification. I don't believe there's been any updates since the July meeting. Miroslav, did you want to speak about the status of that?
Yeah, the one thing that I want to do soon is to move the REAP, the unsynchronized status, as was discussed. I think it was Dieter who suggested this. Yeah, it seems there was an agreement to do this change, even though it will mean NTP v4 clients and NTP v5 clients will have to interpret this field differently, but it will be clear.
Okay.
And I think there is still this unresolved issue with identification of reference clocks, as there is no reference ID field. If we need to add a new field, or if it's reasonable to encode this reference ID into the Bloom filter that's used for loop detection. Yeah, I think these are the most important issues.
Okay. We have this a little bit later in the agenda, but one of the things that I was hoping for, the next face-to-face meeting of the IETF will be in Dublin in November. And given that a number of our developers are European-based, I was hoping we could try and do some sort of a hackathon effort in Dublin if possible. I don't know if, like in particular, if you and David are interested or have the time to do that. Be thinking about that.
I think I tested interoperability recently and it seemed to work. There were some issues
Okay, great.
think that we resolved with David, and I think it's now interoperating as expected.
Excellent.
So
it looks like David
it would
will.
be great if there was a third implementation that
Yeah.
we could test.
Do we have any hints of a third implementation anywhere? All right, so David says he will be in Dublin for the hackathon, so that will be great. And we'll see if we can get some interest in a third implementation with that. I think the document's been around for a while, and it's been fairly mature. I'd really love to see some additional feedback if people could give it some reading. Give it a review, that would be great. Anything else on NTP v5? All right. Rough time. Watson, do you have some updates for us on that?
Yes, I do. The big update is we have moved the repo to be under the IETF NTP working group organization. So that was recently completed. I understand that someone, and I'm sorry I've forgotten who at the moment, prepared a big text revision but hasn't submitted a PR yet. Please do. And I also just saw on the list this morning a comment which I will address, and also I got a comment from Chris Patton saying that we probably don't want to change the version number every time we cut a new draft if we don't make backwards incompatible changes. It feels like we're fairly close. The people are now nitpicking about the text, which admittedly could use some work in places. Obviously look it over. If you spot something, you probably aren't the only one. And I think we're fairly close. I'll aim to get a revision done in the next couple of weeks that incorporates all those comments, and that would be, I hope, ready. I see Marcus is on the call. It's in the queue.
Go ahead, Marcus.
No, you can finish, Watson. This is sort of, I'm just placing myself in the queue.
Oh, I was pretty much done. So,
okay. In that case, yeah. So first of all, I agree with pretty much everything Watson said. I think we're pretty close. And I believe it was Christoph and one of his colleagues that sent us a long list of very helpful comments. And I think they also prepared an actual edit. So we're waiting for the pull request there. And I intend to, hopefully pretty soon after we've merged that pull request, to fix a lot of the outstanding nits and issues that are in the draft. Me and Watson and a couple of others had a work meeting probably like a month ago, where we sort of ironed out most of the sort of issues that were still outstanding. And I think I just need to go through and make sure we've updated the draft to reflect everything we agreed on. I also did a couple of weeks ago, I went through to see what implementations are there out there currently of rough time. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I found 9, some of them abandoned, some of them server only, some of them client only. But I think it's safe to say that there's a handful, so 5 or 6 implementations that are at least somewhat actively being worked on. I've spoken with NetNode, who are, and they've received funding from, I think it's RIPE NCC, to do rough time work, and they're very, very keen on us doing a hackathon in Dublin.
Okay.
And we're hoping to be able to contact a lot of these implementation authors and try and get as many as possible to participate, either on site or remotely. And it's looking like I'm going to be able to join the hackathon in Dublin.
Excellent. You anticipated my next question.
Yes. And off the top of my head, I think that's all I had to say.
Okay. David, you're in the queue.
Yeah, I had a short question. I sent an email regarding the section on Greece in the standard at this point, with a few comments, primarily on extending the Greece stuff, but also on maybe nailing down the specifics on malformed, on sending explicitly, intentionally malformed rough time messages to exercise those parts of clients. And I was wondering if there's work to be done there. Does that change your view of how far along we are, or is that basically already done?
I don't expect it to be contentious. I think you're right that we should specify more clearly what kinds of things are permitted. And you raised, I think, is an editorial point about how you select versions not being quite. What we meant is what you said in the email. What we actually wrote is not. So we got to fix that. But I don't think those are. I don't think it will take us much time to. I don't expect it to be contentious.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the technical side of the rough time, so I wasn't sure if the malformed stuff would be hard or not.
Okay. Yeah, I do see a number of emails today. Is there anything else on rough time? Any other questions? All right. We will proceed with planning for hackathons for NTP v5 and for rough time in Dublin. I think it'll be nice to have a good critical mass of people working on time-related stuff. I think that will be very productive. So with that, the next item is on the agenda, it's NTS for PTP. I didn't know, Miroslav, if we wanted to discuss the issue you brought up on the mailing list, or if the discussion on the mailing list is adequate.
I'm sorry, NTS for PTP?
Well, yeah, and NTS for PTP, but the NTS for NTP issue on the implementation problem that you've brought up on the mailing list. I didn't know if you want to discuss that first.
I think that's unrelated to PTP. It's
right. I didn't have it on the agenda originally because it hadn't come up on the mailing list at that point.
yeah. Well, yeah, there is this issue that I messed up. The servers and clients that are in use currently use a wrong exporter for the keys used in NTS. And the question is if the working group should be involved in fixing this, I think, and if there are any recommendations how to fix it, or if it actually needs to be fixed, like if there could possibly be an update to the document that for this specific algorithm, the exporter is different and everyone could follow that. It seems there is no other implementation using this algorithm yet, so maybe that would be the simplest solution. I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen a fair amount of discussion on the mailing list. I guess what I was wondering was if there was anything productive we could talk about here today, or if you just wanted to continue the conversation on the mailing list. It seems like there's a number of options or ways to go and things to consider.
Yeah, if anyone has any suggestions, yeah, that'd be great.
Does anybody Watson, are you in the queue, or is this just left over from last time? Oh, now you're
Or we
out.
just left over. I couldn't turn it off.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I think that the conversation on the mailing list is very important. I wish everybody would take a quick look at it to see if you have any suggestions. And does anybody have any comments here or any discussion related to this? I know I threw it onto the agenda as any other business. Nope. All right. So that brings us to NTS for PTP. Martin, do you want to speak to the status of that?
Yes, of course. Yeah, about the draft, here we have no further updates, but Rainer and I are currently discussing some points that we discussed at the last IEEE meeting. So about the replay problem, about the TLVs, and I also asked Doug what we can do about the problem with the sites is also a discussion point. So Rainer and I are working on a few documents which we can use at the next IEEE meeting. And regarding the implementation, I'm working simultaneously on the implementation. So yeah, so those are 3 points. So I guess the next update on the draft document will be available in a few months, at least in February next year. There's a big update planned. But currently, we are focusing on the discussion points at the IEEE. So yeah,
Okay.
This is the current state.
And the do you have any update on your implementation status as well, or is that?
The key management is almost finished or operational. It's also a project for GMV. So this is one reason why I want to implement it as fast as I possibly can. But I need some time, especially because of the problem with the TLV. So there are some points to clarify before I can finish it or implement it in my code. So I guess I need also a few months before I can maybe join at a hackathon to provide a functioning code or functioning program.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that. And so, as a reminder, the security subcommittee in 1588 is where some of these conversations are happening, and you can ask to be added to that mailing list. It's not quite as open as IETF, but for anybody who's interested in following that conversation there, it would be helpful. All right. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. Do we have any? I have a couple administrative things at the end, but do we have any other things people want to bring up or ask about? Excellent. David, go ahead.
Yeah, because of the stuff on the grease within rough time, I've started to think about the grease we have within NTP, or the lack of grease we have in NTP at the moment. as well as within NTS. For NTP, the solution seems to be fairly obvious to just introduce that with NTP v5, and I'm planning to make a suggestion for at least some amount of grease in a few mechanisms in NTP v5 in the next couple of weeks. But I was wondering whether we are also interested in doing that retroactively for NTS, specifically around negotiating ciphers and that sort of stuff.
Do you mean adding it to NTS for NTP or including it in NTS for PTP?
Adding it to NTS as in general. Most of this would actually be protocol independent, I guess, because it's stuff around adding random records that should be ignored by servers because they don't have the critical bit set and things like that. Adding unknown, specifically reserved cryptography suits to the negotiation, of course, is NTS for NTP specific, but there's a few things that we probably should do there.
Okay. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah. So regarding grease, to be honest, I had never heard about grease before I started working on Ruftime, and grease has been in Ruftime since the very first Google version of the draft, and I don't know if any servers, Watson can probably answer this better than me, actually implement grease today in Ruftime, and I don't know or if there's IETF experience regarding grease. Maybe we should try and figure out what experience there is with using grease and what positive or negative impacts it has. Before so my greatest fear here is that we spend a lot of time inserting grease in NTP v5 or NTS, only to then find out that no one actually ends up implementing it.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Yeah, so for the implementation side of things, I would say that at least the implementation I work on will implement it. In terms of experience from within the IETF, the reason I bring it up is because of the experience the TLS working group has had with it, and especially with the lack of it in the transition to TLS 1.3. Which was a real nightmare for them. And some of the similar things we are now seeing with NTP and the lack we had of grease in NTP v4, which is making a number of options for doing version negotiation for NTP v5 just unavailable to us because there are multiple servers out there that if they see an extension field that they don't recognize, for example, they'll just ignore the entire message instead of doing stuff with it. So that's why I was bringing it up.
Okay. Rich, did you want to add something?
Yeah. So the reason why it came up in TLS, just to add a little bit to what David said, the TLS 1.3 handshake looks just like the TLS 1.2 handshake because middle boxes got in the way and they dropped messages and so on. And for a UDP-oriented protocol, it's going to probably be even worse. So I think it'd be great for NTP to start to grease everything because it forces anything that's along the network path to not just assume that the values defined are the only values, but that the values defined are the ones that have meaning, and anything else you should ignore or allow yourself to be configured to ignore. So adding options to the various, kiss of death fields or operation codes would be also make sense over time. It's used heavily in TLS. It's used in Quick because it's basically the same communities there. So yeah, I strongly encourage it. And I see in the chat that James put in with the RFC that talked about our experiences with it.
Okay. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that listening to Rich, listening to David here, made me pretty convinced that Greece and NTP and NTS is probably a good idea, especially considering the problems we've seen with the size of NTP packets with NTS being dropped from numerous networks. So yeah, it's probably a very good idea to consider Greece and NTP v5 and NTS.
Okay. David?
Okay, yeah, given the positive feedback, I'll try to spend some time in the next few weeks making initial suggestions for how we could go about this.
All right, that sounds good. So with that, if there's nothing else, we are at the end of our agenda. Keep an eye out for a joint informal meeting between IEEE and the NTP working group. We, depending on how things are progressing, we might have another quick virtual interim like this one prior to the November face-to-face meeting. And then we will plan on a hackathon for whatever NTP working group related activities are ready to go in November. Is there anything else for today's agenda? Thank you all for coming, and my apologies again for forgetting we had the meeting. So,
Thank you.
all right. Everybody have a good day.